Welcome. My name is Douglas Ray, and as Dean of the St. Thomas University School of Law, it is my genuine pleasure to welcome you today. I have the honor of introducing a true world leader, the former President of Mexico, the Honorable Vicente Fox. Joining me in this welcome is the President of our university, the Reverend Monsignor Franklin Casal, who in addition to leading our university, has been a leader in this nation's and the world's fight against human trafficking. I want to especially thank one of our law students, Stephen Tipton, and his father, Bruce Tipton, for their efforts in helping us invite President Fox. President Fox's visit ties in well with what we do at this law school. The 72 flags you see in our breezeway are in celebration of the 250 lawyers from 65 countries who have been trained here in our graduate program in intercultural human rights, and the many JD students who join us from other countries. Our immigration clinic engages our students in providing legal help to people from all over the world, and our Human Rights Institute represents over 6,000 immigrants a year. It is now my honor to introduce President Vicente Fox, who has had an outstanding career of making a difference. To give full credit to his accomplishments might take longer than his talk, so I will try to be brief. President Fox grew up on a ranch in Mexico and earned his college degree in business administration at Mexico City's Ibero-American University. He later earned a diploma in upper management from the Harvard University School of Business. His first position in business was with Coca-Cola of Mexico as a route supervisor on a delivery truck. Within 10 years, he was named president of Coca-Cola Mexico, increasing Coca-Cola sales by almost 50% and making it Mexico's top-selling soft drink. When the company offered him greater global responsibilities tied to a move to the United States, instead, he decided to stay in Mexico and serve the people of Mexico. He left the company and began his second career, that of public service. He was elected to the Federal Chamber of Deputies and later to the governorship of his state in 1995, winning by a margin of 2-1. In the year 2000, he was elected president of Mexico. His election as a candidate of the National Action Party was especially historic because it ended over 70 years of domination by the institutional Revolutionary Party. As president from 2000 to 2006, he devoted his presidency to economic growth and opportunity, reducing crime and drug trafficking, and improving trade relations with the United States and Canada. He was also an advocate for human rights and introduced reforms to strengthen the rights of Mexico's indigenous peoples, among other human rights advances. Since leaving the presidency, he has continued to be a global thought leader, speaking around the world on important issues, serving as co-president of the centrist Democrat International, and being heavily involved in community service. He is involved with orphanages, educational institutions, and other charitable organizations. His presidential library, the Fox Center of Studies Library and Museum, also known as Centro Fox, is being built in his home state. It is far more than a library, and it is far more than a place. Under his leadership, it trains adults and children from all walks in life in principles of leadership and studies ways to alleviate poverty, create economic growth, and support human rights. It offers courses of study that help change lives and is a think tank devoted to finding solutions to world problems. We look forward to the day when we can partner with Vicente Fox through our own intercultural human rights program, our environmental sustainability program, and our planned Center for Global Justice and Dialogue. If time remains at the end of President Fox's talk, he is willing to entertain questions. Because of the limited time available, we'll be asking that if you have questions, you put them on the cards you were given when you came in, pass them to the end of the aisle when the people come around, and then we will try to get to as many of them as we can. President Fox, it is my honor and pleasure to welcome you to our community and present you with this small token of our appreciation. It reads, the St. Thomas University School of Law recognizes President Vicente Fox in appreciation for his leadership and commitment to justice, April 11, 2011.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. A ver, aquí el tiempo. Tan importante el tiempo siempre. Aquí el acordeón. You know what accordion means? See? We used to use it in exams. Very small acordeones like this to get through difficult exams. ¿Cuántos hablan español? ¿Todos? ¿Todas? ¿Cuántos son cubanos? ¿Y mexicanos? Bravo. Okay, let me start by, excuse me, saluting from here, Marta. Marta had to stay in the hotel with a BlackBerry because we've been out of home now for 10 days, slightly over 10 days. And we run the center, even if we're not there, because we have to raise money, so we travel 70% of our time. So Marta, un beso para Marta, un gran beso para Marta. Big kiss for Marta. And now let me, with your permission, address first a brief salute to all migrants, all Mexicans, all Cubans, all Hispanics, all Asians that are in this nation, building this nation with their effort, with their hard working, with their quality, with their loyalty. They are a very special caste. Migrants are a very special caste, very special kind of leadership. Because one day they decided to do better. So they left home and they came to different places in the world. Migration is a great asset. And that's why migrants are my heroes. Even those who migrated not at will, but they were forced by the circumstances. And same for those who willingly move out from home, like my grandfather did. He was a migrant. He was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. And in 1895, he decided to take a horse and ride down to Mexico with that very special migrant spirit, because he came out without money in his pocket. And he settled down in the state of Guanajuato, where we've been there, the family, for 5 generations. That's leadership, going after the unknown, crossing deserts, crossing mountains, borders, and getting to a place where you're not known and where you don't know the place. And he managed. He got a job there as a night watchman on a small horse carriage factory. And then in 10 years, he was owner and CEO of the company. And then he saved 100,000 silver pesos, at that time equivalent to the silver dollar here. And he bought the farm where we are, where Vicente Fox has been built, on that 200-year-old dairy cow stable. But we brought in very modern facilities. And that's the place that is dedicated to leadership. And that's the place you should visit whenever you're in Mexico. Please visit us. We have the best enchiladas and tortillas, mole that you ever tasted, and we have a lot of tequila. Well, the other grandfather, he was born in Asturias, Spain. And he came with those thousands, hundreds of thousands of migrants that came through Ely Island to this great nation. They were here to make the Americas, they used to call it, hacer la América. And again, without a penny in his pocket, he landed in Veracruz and he made his way in Mexico. But a brother of him, this I was told by an aunt of mine, he tried to make the same trip. He was on the ship coming to Cuba, like his brother did time before. And when he was reaching Cuba, there was a storm. So the ship had to move around and went to Florida, came to Florida. And this grandfather of mine, this uncle grandfather, he decided to go, according to my aunt, to the Everglades, and he was eaten by a crocodile. So he was also a leader, but he was a lost leader. Okay, first we have in leadership the great institutions. The leadership of Britain on the 19th century, which created an empire. The leadership of the United States during the 20th century, together with one leadership that unfortunately today is a little bit lost, which is the United Nations, that great institution that was created precisely to lead peace, harmony in the world, to meet and solve conflict among nations. And today it needs a little repair, needs a little reinventing, so that that leadership is regained back again. Because if that leadership is not present with a great moral, ethical authority, then we see things like happen United States, intervening everywhere in the world. In a way, considering himself, this nation, the police of the world, the guardian of democracy and freedom, and its leaders usually have good, solid objectives to meet. But unfortunately, each time that this nation gets involved somewhere else, it gets into trouble. And how much better it would be to do that reinvention of the United Nations, of the Bretton Woods institutions, and have those institutions take care of those tasks and those challenges, and it would be much better. It would have been much better that the United Nations got involved in Iraq and not the United States. And same thing happens many times through life. But anyway, it's a kind of leadership that very important in the world. And today, leadership is changing. Things are changing in our world. We learn about, we read about this power and financial shift to the East. Some believe it, some don't. But the hard facts are that the Chinese economy, no more than 20 years from now, will be the largest, by far the largest economy in the world. And will have to be forced to exercise leadership. And we see other nations like Korea, like the Tigers of Asia, like the whole of Asia, preparing themselves to exercise that leadership. And Korea gave us a little test of that leadership on this last G20 meeting, where one nation that is in the process of emerging, like Korea, had the opportunity to lead G20 that accounts for over 80% of the gross product of the world, and that gets together in those summit meetings the big nations of the world, where power, markets, financial markets are present in that. And Korea did a great job. And they're preparing themselves because I learned 2 weeks ago, Martha and I were in Korea addressing a conference, and we learned that 83% of kids in Korea graduate from a university. This nation is around 60. And we in Latin America or in Mexico are around 22. So we're lagging way behind. What I'm saying is that Asia is preparing themselves to lead in the future. So this is what we see coming. And then we hear about the BRIC, these emerging powerful engines that today are moving the economies of the world. BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China. I think they missed one nation that should be there, which is Mexico. And this should be BRICS, because Mexico's economy is much larger than Russian economy, because Mexico's per capita income is higher than Russia, and even with Brazil, of course, much higher than India. So within those 4 engines should be Mexico as the 5th engine. And Mexico is just right across. We're neighbors, we're friends, we're partners with this great nation in Canada through NAFTA. But this BRIC concept today seems to be getting short and is not covering all what is going on in the world. Because there's many other BRICS coming along, many other emerging nations all throughout the world. Just in Latin America, we have Chile, we have Colombia, we have Peru, we have Panama growing at rates of 9 to 11% a year, their gross product. And they just found the best economic minister that any other nation has in Latin America. And the name of that economic minister is Hugo Chavez, which by doing so bad, so much money is coming out of Venezuela that it is going to be invested in Panama. And that's why Panama grows and grows. And the other guy keeps dreaming that he's going to be the Castro of the 21st century. That's Hugo Chavez's dream. A populist, a demagogue, which has very clear objectives, which is to destroy Venezuelan future. So leadership can be very bad, very harmful, like in that case. There are Venezuelans here? Muy bien, amigos. Bueno, esto es una Venezuela vasca, Yeah, from Spain. Bueno. Okay. So, a lot of things going on around the world, and we must prepare for that. But let me throw here a concept of leadership. Yes, we have to prepare. Leaders have to prepare themselves. Leaders have to learn more and more things, have a lot of knowledge. But that's just partially true, because there are many, many leaders that don't know how to read or write. And they exercise a great leadership. You just have to visit some indigenous communities or some neighborhoods where leaders are, or some leaders within a family, or leaders within a student body in a university. So leadership, at the very end, is everywhere. But leadership also is something we all have within. And everything starts here, within ourselves. And fortunately, we all are leaders. We all are created leaders. We all have that power within. We all have the capacities. We all have the potential. Unfortunately, many of us don't go within ourselves. We don't ask who we are. What are we in this life for? Like my grandfather in Cincinnati, he asked himself if he should keep doing the job he was doing. He was the assistant of the butcher in Cincinnati, Ohio, and his job was to kill the hogs on the backyard and then bring the meat to the front to be sold. So he asked himself if that's all what he was going to be doing in his life, and he decided to change. So you discover leadership many times for what you're doing and you don't feel comfortable with it. Or you discover leadership in a different way. San Ignacio de Loyola, an accident. He was famous with girls. He would have the best girls in town. And he repented later. But with this accident he was in bed for 3 months. And then he had the opportunity to think about what was his life then, if he was happy with what he was doing. And he decided not. So in those few weeks, he learned that he could do many other things. And he comes out of that, and he creates the Jesuit order, and he creates the largest university net in the world, even as of today. And then he gets those followers, Francisco Javier and Pedro and the others, and he tells them, okay, you're going to isolate from the world, you're going to be 90 days in silence, and when you finish those 90 days, you come and see me. So, no more instructions than that. 90 days after, they come, and he tells Javier, you go to India. Pedro, you go to China. Nobody asked how to get there. They didn't ask or comment that they didn't know Mandarin or they didn't know Indian language. They just went there, and they succeeded. So that's the power we all have within once we decide to go for a heroic aspiration, a heroic cause. And that's what they did. So coming back to my grandfather, right there at Rancho San Cristobal is where we built this center. And right there is where we concentrate on leadership. And that's where we invite these 500 kids that we bring in every day to go within themselves, to make sure that they learn the capacities they have and how far they can go. that their destiny is not to be migrants, that their destiny is not to be albañiles in the construction industry, that the destiny is not to work on the harvesting fields, that the destiny is much higher than that. And so that's the kind of information, message we give to them so that we can repair a little bit our Latin America and our Mexico. And I'm very tough on this, but if you are not true with yourselves, and if you're not frank in your evaluations, then you're never correct. And we in Latin America were a total failure on the 20th century. All of us, all of us. We are just reaching the very best, the leading ones, 10,000 US dollars per capita. We have in Latin America 45 to 50% of our population that is poor. We have many, many families, the majority of them, that don't have the opportunity to have an enriching life, to have a job, to go to school. I mentioned in universities, 78 of our kids out of each 100 don't have the opportunity to be in a university. And that's why those students that are here, that are in this great quality, excellent, state-of-the-art university, must be sure that that means responsibility. You're going to have a great learning process, educative process here, but the more so, we're obliged to think about those other 78 kids and to think about how are we going to get them to school in Latin America? How are we going to get them to school here in Mexico, down south? And that's the commitment that we have, because we need those leaders in Latin America. Ethical, strong, compassionate, committed. And we need it because we passed all throughout the 20th century in the hands of dictators. Military dictators, personal dictators, everywhere. You name it, and dictators. Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, Ecuador, Bolivia, everywhere. Authoritarian governments in many of our nations. Messianic leaders like the Perons in Argentina. So what happened? That we would not live by or learn about democracy and freedom. And we were educated, and the culture was to expect everything from the powerful. He will give us the jobs, that government will give us the schools, they will construct the hospitals, and we were not educated under the culture that you do go as far as your own effort and as far as you commit and you're passionate with what you're doing. Nobody's going to come to do for you what you don't do for yourself. And that is true. And that's something migrants learn, and that's why migrants move and look for those opportunities. But that's why we have what we have. But finally, the 80s, the 90s, we all decided for change. We all, in Latin America, in just short 2 decades, we got rid of the dictators, and we got rid of the authoritarian governments. And we did it like 200 years ago in independence. In 2 decades, every Latin American nation became independent. And in those 2 decades, at the end of last century, all of Latin America became democratic, except, how many Cubans we have here? We have to work on that one. Or God has to work and take him away. But you know, we then learn that you can progress. And in these last 10 years, Latin America grew at rates of over 6%, the whole of the region. We have never done that before. And for the first time, we reduced poverty. We had not done it before. 18% reduction on poverty for all of the region in those 10 years. 35% reduction on poverty in the case of Mexico. And it's not because of governments. It's because families, women in first place, and people on their own effort overcame poverty and became middle classes. But because we were acting now democratically, we were acting with freedom, we were acting with responsibility, and things changed, and now we're moving. But we have rights and shadows. We again see some based on the maybe still slow advance that are becoming nostalgic and again thinking on the past. And we begin to see again in Latin America messianic demagogues like Hugo Chavez, aspirations for authoritarian governments, aspirations for dictators because they want to stay there until they say they're going to solve everything for the Venezuelans and for the Bolivians. So that means that we're very young democracies and that we are not yet totally consolidated, and that democracy needs nourishment, needs protection, needs love, needs commitment, because you give it for granted and all of a sudden you don't have it anymore. So we must in Latin America be very careful with our young democracies, and this is exactly why one of the main charters of Vicente Fox at the side of leadership is freedom and democracy. It's market economy, because we have to defend, we have to be champions in defending that, otherwise we lose it, and like it's happening today. But besides that, Latin America is, for the first time, on the path. We really are doing great. Mexico is doing great. And the rest of nations, except those that the leadership is negative at this moment. We're now leaving behind presidentialism. We're now very clear on the autonomy of branches of power. We're very clear now the mandate of people in electoral processes. So we're doing much better. But still problems ahead. And particularly in the case of Mexico, obstacles that we have. One has to do with good part of the charter of this university. It has to deal with that evil mix of migration, human trafficking, drugs, cartels, and violence. Right now, in the case of Mexico, this is explosive. And the three things are mixed there. And the violation of human rights is becoming more and more frequent. And the violations of justice, or the fair due process of justice, is not being respected. Because of this urgency to finish with the problem, and because we're using violence against violence. And violence will never correct violence, according to my point of view. We need different strategies. There is no way we can succeed on this so-called war against crime and drugs through not respecting human rights and due legal process for everybody. And that's not being complied with at this moment in Mexico. So it will at the very end be a very Pyrrhic win of that war. So we need new thinking, we need lateral thinking, we need new visions of how to work out our problem that we have today. How do we get out of this trap in which we are today? And it's extending to Central America. Central America is no different to Mexico in most places there. So this is where academy is to be. Academy should always be together with the other two great sectors on the leading side. The private sector, the public sector, needs academy, needs fresh thinking, uncommitted thinking, liberal thinking, needs the exercise of freedom to the very end that academy brings and universities bring. And that's something we don't have too much in Latin America. I mean, usually the big, powerful governments don't consult with academia. And not even the coordination or the harmony between public and private sector is not yet there sufficient enough. So through this, we have to come up with those new ideas that will come from discussion, from free acting, and that's something that Benjamin Franklin wrote. Those who cede freedom or small spaces of freedom, looking after security, temporary security, they will not attain freedom. Shh, ya cállate, maestro. It's time. They will not attain freedom nor justice, nor peace. And I think we have to find out the right blend, and we have to work. The problem of Mexico right now is severe. And I said it wrong. It's not the problem of Mexico. We just happen to be in between. We are not a large producer of drugs. California produces more marijuana than Mexico altogether, and that's true. Those are facts. Produce a lot of marijuana in California. The other drugs mostly produced down south in Venezuela, in Colombia, in Ecuador, and Bolivia. So Mexico is the transit place, and we just happen to be in between. We are not a intense consumer of drugs, Mexico. I mean, what we consume per capita there is 100% of what is consumed per capita here. So the problem is for the region, and maybe for the whole of the world. If this nation had commitment, I always ask, what happens with the drug once it crosses the border? Yeah, those smart Mexicans, they smuggle the drug, they bring in the containers, okay, up to the border. And then who takes it up north? Who takes it to Chicago, who takes it to Seattle, to Washington, to Midland, Odessa, or whatever? There is criminality here, there is gangs here, there's cartels, there's drug distribution. So who takes it? Who distributes? Who sells it in the high school? Who sells it in the retail store there? Who distributes? Who collects? Who launders the money that is collected? And maybe some big institutions here do that laundering. And at the very end, that money, that mammoth amount of money, it's billions of US dollars, go back to Mexico to bribe policemen, to bribe public functionaries, goes back to Venezuela and Colombia to pay the producers. So all that business is being nourished by consumers here in this nation, paying for the drug. And then part of that money goes to buying weapons and ammunition. And where is that bought? Right here. This nation, I mean, so free, so easy the access to buying guns and ammunition, all of us bought here and brought back to equip those cartels that have become terrible, have become powerful because of the money, because of the weapons they have, and because of the market they have here. And in the last 4 years, the end result is 40,000 kids killed, 14 to 25-year-olds shot. And another 40,000 killed them. And it's estimated that another 100,000 are working for the cartels for $1,000 a month. And they come out of home every day to kill or die. So we have lost, up to now in these 4 years, 200,000 kids in Mexico. That's painful. That's a big loss. And we have lost tourism, and the border is down to zero. Down south is reductions, severe reductions most everywhere. We have lost foreign investment. We have lost talent. You see a lot of Mexicans coming here and buying land and buying homes and buying apartments and investing money because they have fear. They have fear. So they're moving their families out, especially those on the north. So we're losing a lot of talent. We're losing talent of kids in U.S. universities. I asked them, are you going to go back to Mexico to give us a hand? They said, I'm going to think it. 1 year I'm going to work here, and then I will see what's going on. So it's a huge cost, the one we're paying. This is why, as I said before, let's think laterally, let's put ideas on the table. There's an election coming in Mexico. 2012 will be a very key, crucial point, and ideas. Number one, to separate crime from health. Like you did here in the United States back 100 years ago with alcohol. The prohibited alcohol finally was authorized to be consumed. Black market finished. Criminals went somewhere else, and peace came back to Chicago. So separate. Attend the health problem with a program and attend the violence program up until it's reduced to zero. Prohibitions don't work. And I have to say this, even it's a Catholic university or Catholic inspired, but we have to open our eyes and see what's going on. But today, maybe the last prohibition that still remains is drugs. In many of our constitutions down south, abortion has been approved. It's not prohibited anymore. Marriage between couples of the same sex has been approved in many constitutions and many regulations. It's not forbidden, so prohibitions don't work. What works is education, is information, and is using our freedom with responsibility. Because who at the very end is responsible for consuming drugs? Well, that kid, or that person, or that whoever he is. He is the responsible. He decides to consume drugs on his free will. Maybe he's not too well informed that drugs are bad to your health, that he might be killing himself. And that has to be made very clear to them. But at the very end, it's a free choice. That's what we are created with, free choice. God created us for free choice so that we determine how we're going to behave. Or instead of following that course of discussion, then we say, no, let's use government. Let's tell government, okay, you government, you put a case of crystal, of glass to my kids so they cannot reach drugs. That will never happen. Governments will never succeed in doing that. So maybe we should change the thinking there and go free, go legal, depenalize drugs. And this is what Portugal did 10 years ago. And there is a Cato report, K-A-T-O, think tank in Washington, D.C., came out with a report 10 years after. And there's a 25% decrease in drug consumption in Portugal. So they seem to be getting out of the problem and solving the problem through decriminalizing. United States, now more than half of the states have new regulations that permit marijuana for medical use. In California was 44% approval on the last referendum for legalizing. So we should think that. In the case of Mexico, the other thing that I've been putting on the table is I don't think the Army should be there. Armies don't respect human rights. Look at Guantanamo, what happened there with respect to human rights in the U.S. Army. And Mexican Army frequently now is not respecting human rights. On the urgency to get the criminal, they're not respecting their rights, they're not respecting their due process for justice. So things have to be done there. Army has to be withdrawn back to their headquarters, and police should be doing the work that Army would not be doing well. So this association between crime and migration and human trafficking is explosive in Mexico. We have to work a lot on that. And we have to start the sooner the better to be able to remove the obstacles and then be able to move Latin America and Mexico to a very successful 21st century. And we must make sure that women are going to be there hand by hand with those, the machinists, the machos that will run our nations and our economy not too well. You know, in Vicente Fox, we invited not individuals to our board of trustees, we invited couples. So we have 40 couples on the board of trustees of Vicente Fox, and it's really enriching because it's a different vision, full of love, understanding, a vision that has to do with building a better world for kids and next generations, a vision that is compassionate, loving, caring, and I think Latin America has to make sure that 21st century we tackle with by hand of women and young youth. Maybe not as young as the cabinet in Mexico because nadie se rió. Maybe we have too many kids there. You always have to have a good blend in unexperienced, young, full of heart, full of dynamism, and the experience of others. That make sure that if you decide to go to Iraq, you better find out and have a plan, which President Bush didn't have. And so he comes out of power with 25% approval after having been 70. Lesson: when you go to a war or you're going to accomplish something that is difficult, better have a plan and make sure that you're going to win that war. And that's the dilemma that Mexico has right now. We got into that war, and it seems to be that we never evaluate how powerful those cartels are, the enormous resources they have, and how they can keep increasing those resources here in this nation. And finally, we have to build bridges, not walls. That's a historical mistake of this nation. Walls don't work. We have to build bridges of understanding, of exchange, bridges of collaboration, because at the very end we're partners. And this is what hopefully we can do between this university and Vicente Fox. We're very close together. We can work on many of these issues that I mentioned. And now please go ahead with your questions or comments.
We've received dozens of, of interested questions from members of the audience. I've had to screen them down given the limitations of time, and I apologize to those of you whose questions we do not receive. They are provocative questions of world policy, world politics, historical implications. I was quite impressed. There's been a lot of interest among our audience in Centro Fox, and people are wondering, even in the immediate future, is there an opportunity for students and international scholars to join you in any way?
Of course, absolutely yes, and that's the kind of bridging that we can do. Centro Fox, we work with different universities. We don't have a large staff. We're a few changos, I say, a few, 25 of them running that institution, among them Marta and myself. But we decided to link, to associate, and by the way, that's the only way you succeed in today's world. So we work with Georgetown, George Washington University, with Emory, with the University of Southern California, with Calgary, with Complutense in Spain. We work with think tanks like Elcano in Spain, like Woodrow Wilson here in the States, like RAND Corporation, the largest think tank in the world. So that's the way we structure our doing and organization. So yes, absolutely yes. And we spoke a little bit about possibly doing that. I still have to see the archivist, which I'm going to see at lunch. I'm going to get his blessing for that, because I have seen it. No, we have to do that, yes, please, and we will find ways of how to do it. And I think it's very important still for people that is here in the United States to come down to Latin America and to Mexico. It's a different world. It is in a way a successful world. Not everything is poverty, not everything is unemployment, not everything is the problems that I mentioned. We have technology, we're very vanguard in manufacturing or producing food, or our universities or whatever. So it's a different world that has to be seen. And coming to the heart of Mexico, where we are, is different, of course, than Cancun, or different than Cabos. It's totally different than that. It's culture. It's a rich, rich culture. It's places worthwhile visiting. Yes.
Our second question is from a member of the audience who, it's both a historical and a leadership question. Given the historic nature of your election, and ending over 70 years of domination by the other party, the question is, what leadership challenges did you face in your first few years in changing that culture?
Well, I call it now Obama's and Fox's mistakes. We overcreated too much expectations. And not because what we said or what we committed. It's because people also has a great imagination. You add a lot of crema to the tacos, a lot of cream. So look at President Obama, all the expectations he created, not only here in this nation, but everywhere in the world. Of course, he's not compliant with them. My case was the same. Everybody thought they would have a job next day, that they would double their salaries next day, that they would have a seat in the university next day. Everything will be solved. And that's not true. There's only one way to success, according to my point of view. There's only one way that you can change a nation in one generation, and it's through education. That's the best investment. That's where we have to concentrate the effort, and that's what Korea is so successful, because they are doing that, and they will go very far, far ahead. So I think that having the association, the partnership that we have with the United States will also be a great way of overcoming problems to the future. Many people don't know, for instance, that Mexico imports or buys more products and services from United States than what Italy, France, Germany, and Britain do together. And that means that we are responsible for hundreds of thousands, for millions of jobs to US citizens through our imports. So we're a very solid partner of this nation. And working together will be the best alternative that we have at hand.
One final question, and one that no doubt could require a 3-hour answer in the 5 minutes available. But do you have an opinion, as our Congress and President look at reforming our immigration laws, on what immigration policy from this country would be most respectful and helpful to the needs of the people of Mexico?
Okay, it's a bilateral issue. It's not what you want or you wish. It's what we can put together, both of us. And we did that exercise. As you will remember, for the first time in history, the first trip that the President of the United States took was to Mexico and not to Canada, as it used to be. And he came into this small, teeny community of San Cristobal, where Vicente Fox is, to give a big, big kiss to my mother. And she was the proudest lady in the world when the President of the United States comes there and gives her that kiss. Then we sat to work, day and a half, close to 2 days. Only one commitment. We would proceed with a looking and making sure that we would attain a migration reform. That was the only outcome of that meeting. And we started working passionately towards that until September 11th came about. A very sad day that should never ever repeat again. And priorities changed, and the thinking of this nation changed, and fear dominated the scene. I still sense that many decisions this nation is taking, like building that wall, is fear. Like the changes in Arizona, it's fear. Like the ones now they want to do in Alabama, it's fear. And fear is not a good advisor, nor for leaders, nor for decision makers. So, but that's what happened since. Right before that, 7th of September of year 2001, I addressed both houses of Congress jointly. And everything was ready to go for the approval of that reform. And that reform is very, very simple. It was presented by a bipartisan way. Senator McCain and Senator Kennedy presented it. It was discussed by months and years by the Bush administration and my administration. McCain, Kennedy came to Mexico to spend a week there that I sat with them. What encompasses that reform? Number one is those 11 million at that time that were illegally or undocumented, better than illegally, working here in the States. As long as they had a job, they should stay with it, and they should be respected in their human rights, their labor rights. They should be open to go back and forth to their nations. Finally, they should be allowed to bring in their families as long as they keep that job. That's 11 million people that would get that benefit. Those who don't or didn't have then the job, back. Number two, this nation at that time, growing at the rate of 2.5% a year, there is a demand for 500,000 additional jobs that U.S. citizens will not fulfill. So then you had this issue on that second point on a supply and demand formula of market. So the year that you have the 500,000 need open the valve and bring in 500,000 temporary guest program with a signed agreement like we do with Canada today. So they will come as long as that job will be sustained by the employer. As long as it's there, they stay there. And the contract will be as long as the working contract would last. So that's point number 2. And point number 3 had to do precisely with the moral, with the social implications of this dividing families, which is criminal, according to my point of view. The women back there in Guatemala or in Mexico by herself, having the need to feed the children. The men here, some of them very wrongly looking for a güera, getting married, so that they get the nationality. A lot of that is done. But that 3rd chapter of that bill that is in Congress had to do with those implications. And 8 years have passed by. That law is right there. They don't decide in Congress. Fear again, fear for the next election, fear for terrorism, fear for the border, fear that has impeded them to take the decision. And what happens when you create an empty space, when you don't assume your responsibilities, like U.S. Congress is not assuming their responsibility on that issue, that others fill up that space. And here is Arizona coming up with a local law, a state law, which I don't know why it's admitted, because migration is a federal issue. It's not a state issue. But now they're coming with the state laws instead of a federal law that has to do with or deal with the problem. And so that's the situation today in respect to this. Again, I think that no more than 20 years from now, again, this elderly nation, which has more and more retired people, that now retirement is at a younger age or an elder age, whatever. And those elderly need their pension plans. They need their retirement plan. If there is no youth labor to work out the economy and generate the needed funds for retirement, there will be no way that the government can comply, especially with this huge mammoth debt that this nation has today. So, number 1. Number 2, who is going to nurse the elderly? Who's going to take care of them? And they count by the millions. And who is going to pick up the apples in Washington State? Who is going to work on the construction industry? This nation, in the very short term, has a huge need to import labor, or will never be able to compete with Asia. Then the shift of leadership, power, and finance is going to move to Asia, because here we're not doing the right things that we should start doing as soon as possible.
Thank you very much for your thoughts.